You finish your shift, your feet hurt, your back hurts. You check your phone, and there it is, your paycheck, finally, $2,000. You smile for a fraction of a second, then open it up, and all of a sudden your bank account only has $14.56. You glance down, searching for the error, but there, dutifully noted, are all the taxes, the portion of your income due to the government. Income tax, sales, capital gains, the list goes on. The real reason you're paying is infinitely sneakier taxes are the price you pay for the pleasure of existing in a society run by other people who did not let you write the contract first. On the road you drive, the schools you pass, the inspectors who make sure that that food cart doesn't turn out to be a meth lab. They're all funded by the portion of your money the government takes from you. Income tax is money they take from your paycheck. Sales is money they take from your spending. Capital gains is money they take from your sleeping, and two other taxes, Social Security and Medicare, are trying to take money from your future and give it to your elderly past. The most amazing thing about taxes is that the government knows exactly how much you owe them, but has no intention of letting you pay it without making you guess first, and then punishing you for being wrong. This is a terrible situation to be in, but it's also a pretty good place to be if you like your country's current tax policies. And the alternate reality in which said policies weren't in place tends to look even worse. Taxation is an unfortunate necessity, and the fact that we all have to suffer through it is a small price to pay for everything else government gives us. And the fact that governments do give us things is what makes even this small price difficult to swallow. So now, after your taxes have been taken and the rest of your paycheck is safely in your account, what to do with it now? Well, you being you, the prudent thing to do would probably be to put some of it in the bank. And now we come to the next inconvenient truth. The money in your bank account doesn't actually belong to you. As soon as you put that $1,000 in the bank, 900 of it disappeared, and you didn't even know it. The thing about banks is that they're actually just glorified middlemen. Their entire operation is based on skimming money from depositors and giving it to borrowers. And the reason why that works is because nobody, except for the bankers themselves, actually believes that they're going to need all the money they've given depositors to the borrowers all at once. And the day they do will come to be known as a bank panic. Unfortunately for the bankers, that day always comes, and it always ends with the bankers skimming less money from the depositors, which hurts their profit margins. The banks do their best to prevent panic by letting you take your money out whenever you want in relatively small withdrawals, and offering interest to people who leave their money with them, which is money they give you to convince you to let them skim a smaller percentage. The same principle applies, only backwards, for people who borrow from the banks. If you borrow 1,000, you repay 1,280, and that extra 280 is called interest, and represents the profit the banks make by skimming from you instead of their depositors. The power of interest works both ways. If instead of borrowing money the banks lend you money, if you invest $100 and a 7% interest rate, that 100 will become $200 the next year, and 400 the year after, and so on until one day you'll wake up and realize you've become old, wealthy, and mildly condescending towards the poor financial decisions of your youth. Like inflation, interest rates are both a tax and an investment. They just decide which side of the transaction you're on, and the math never change. For as much as we love to complain about banks and inflation, and the way that the government takes some of our money and turns it into a middleman, skimming a little for themselves at every step before giving the rest to the government, there is still one more way our money is slowly stolen from us, and that's inflation. You buy a bag of chips, and it costs 30% more than it did last time, and looks like it's been half-eaten already. Your $5 bill still says 5, but it's suddenly only worth 30% of what it was. Sometimes this happens because suddenly everyone has more money than before, and everyone is willing to spend more money on the same thing, pushing prices higher and higher until something that used to cost 5 is now 7. Sometimes it happens because things are more expensive to make, so companies raise their prices to compensate. And sometimes it happens because people expect prices to go up, so they buy more now, pushing prices up anyway. In all cases, the amount of money you have stays the same, but suddenly it isn't worth what it was before. In general, a little bit of inflation is actually healthy, as it keeps people from locking money away for too long, and pushing prices up too much to compensate makes people unable to afford things. Which is why inflation is usually kept around 2% per year. To combat inflation, central banks will raise interest rates, increasing the amount of money banks give to depositors and skim from borrowers at the same time, which puts a damper on the entire economy by discouraging borrowing and encourages saving. Sometimes the damper is too hard, and the economy stops, a recession, the technical definition of which is 2 straight quarters of negative growth, and 1 month you're financially stable. But the next everybody is getting laid off, and the stock market has developed a crippling existential crisis. In many ways, a recession is just a period of economic deflation, where the entire economy has slowed to a crawl, but just like inflation, it doesn't last forever. And eventually, the central banks will lower interest rates, and everyone will return to buying things only slightly more expensive than they used to be. And the stock market will eventually finish its crisis and get back to business as usual while you're borrowing, spending, and recovering from recessions. It's important to keep track of something called a credit score. Unlike everything else we've discussed, a credit score isn't a type of money. It's a number from 300 to 850. That represents how likely it is that you'll pay someone back money they lend to you, and therefore whether someone should lend you money. Scores under 580 make you very likely to be refused, and scores over 750 make you less likely to be refused. So it's actually incredibly important to take care of your credit score. The formula for it is complicated, but in general, the factors are whether you pay bills on time, how much of your credit you're using compared to how much you have, how long you've had credit, whether you have different types of credit, and whether you've opened a lot of new lines recently. It's actually really easy to ignore your credit score and have it quietly tank, and much harder to improve it, so it's best to keep track of it. And take advantage of the fact that a high credit score can give you a lot of opportunities, and a low one can limit your options. Maybe one day you'll have that dream house, and you'll know that it all came because you took care of your credit score. Perhaps unsurprisingly, you can have good financial habits and take care of your credit score, but still have your credit score suffer due to circumstances outside your control. Daniel Kahneman spent most of his career being surprised by other people and writing about ways other people were systematically wrong when it came to math and systems that seemed invisible to them, and one of those things was credit scores. People who have good, steady jobs and pay off their debts are more likely to have high scores, but it's much harder to have a high score if you don't have any history at all, because there's nothing to prove that you're trustworthy. The thing about credit scores, and this goes for most of the systems we've been discussing, is that people have this idea, an invisible idea, that they're good at it. But they're only good at one specific part of it, and that's not realizing that they're only good at that one part. And so now, finally, we come to the most amazing revelation of all. That none of the money we've discussed so far, the money that gets paid to the government, the money that disappears in the bank, is actually real money in the first place. $100 bill is only worth $100 because we all agree that it is, and it's a fairly unique system. The government prints the money, and the central bank makes sure that there's always enough, and everyone agrees to accept the money as payment for goods and services. And if the central bank prints too much, inflation eats away at the value, and if they print too little, nobody will want to spend it. In other words, currency doesn't have an inherent value. It's just an agreement that everyone sticks to mostly, and the minute it stops being an agreement, it stops being valuable. So if your money isn't real, what protects you from it disappearing completely? An investment, which is what happens when you take some of the money you've earned and turn it into something that will make you more money. Stocks, bonds, funds, real estate, they're all the same thing in general, only slightly different ways of accomplishing the same ends. There is risk in all of them. But the real risk in doing nothing is letting inflation eat away at everything you have. Benjamin Graham spent his life talking about value and price, and the relationship between the two, and he knew that most objects, stocks included, have neither value nor price, only weight. but other people will try to convince you otherwise. And the reason why they try to convince you has a lot to do with their intent. Gold has no value, but everyone believes that it has value, which means everyone agrees that it has value, so therefore, it does have value. Steve Jobs didn't create value, he didn't print value. He convinced millions of people that his product had value, which meant it did. Value is what other people decide things have, and that's it, nothing more to it. Money is the same, and stocks and bonds and gold and land and pretty much everything else are all money that came from people believing they had value, but they don't inherently have value. Time, however, has value, and it's something that almost all systems we've talked about so far struggle to quantify. And the people who understand it are the ones who manage to leverage systems to make money for themselves. Most people trade their time for money, and the rest of us find ways to make money out of thin air by investing instead, and there's a reason for that. John Keynes knew that the market was irrational, and often did the opposite of what he expected to do. And he knew that the best thing he could do for himself was to make investments that would outlast the market, instead of reacting to little day-by-day changes. The most successful investors are the ones who realize that money makes money, especially when it's left alone to make money over long time scales. And most people who find themselves struggling to have enough money usually spend it on things that don't make money, especially since most of their money has already been taxed, turned into interest, or locked away in the banks. The people who understand that get up each day and do something that makes them a little money, or makes them more money at a slower rate. And the difference between those people and the people without money is time. And the long-term value of a couple extra years of life for the rich can be measured in millions of dollars. You finish your shift. Your feet still hurt, but you're used to it now, and when you check your phone for your paycheck and see it shrink down to $14.56, you know exactly where it has gone and who took it, and what will happen to it in the future.